Hello and welcome. I'm Sama Morningstar, and you may be listening to this or viewing this video in a variety of different places. It will be on the donation page for the Embodied Shakti Summit. It will also be in the Womb-Centered Healing podcast and the Womb-Centered Healing video podcast in a couple of locations. So wherever you're viewing this, thank you for joining us. And I have Monica Larrea with me here today. Thank you for joining us. Monica is the founder of Midwives for Black Lives, which is an organization that gathers financial support for a scholarship fund for Black women who want to become midwives, and she gives that financial support to help them achieve those goals and be able to serve the Black community of women who want to have Black midwives. So there we go. So I would love for you to share with us more about how this project got started and all of that.
Monica. So thank you so much for the invitation. I really appreciate that. And in advance, I just want to thank everyone for their time and attention to hear a little bit about Midwives for Black Lives. And so it all began during my midwifery education. I was attending midwifery school, and not only was I experiencing aggressions in their many forms as a student of color, but I was also like witnessing those aggressions and how they played out, and the difference between myself as being sort of a light-skinned presenting Indigenous person versus the Black students who were darker skinned attending the same school. And as a result, we actually had an event, a very specific event that occurred at the school, that it just became really, really clear that those who were in positions of power at the school, namely the owners and the clinical director, really, really struggled with having, you know, people of color in their institution. They weren't prepared. They hadn't really done the work to be really in these positions of power and working with students of color or preceptors of color. And so we had an event that really clearly let us all know as students kind of where they stood along those lines, and that people of color weren't really safe, you know? And so it was really, so when I was in school, it was about 2015. I went from 2015 to 2016, and there was a lot going on in the media around Black Lives Matter. There was a lot going on around the murdering of, you know, young Black men in the streets by police officers and so on. So we were kind of in the height of at least the public announcing of these things happening, right? Because clearly they've been going on, but it really hadn't reached that tipping point in terms of it being put in the media, right? Where we're becoming aware of what was going on. And so this incident was around having, like, we as students, we really felt disheartened because we were so committed to school. We were like eating, sleeping, breathing midwifery. This program was an intensive program. It didn't really allow us to be the activists that we wanted to be at the same time as being students. And so we had asked if we could put up a Black Lives Matter sign at the school. And we had asked, like, we were like, just let us do this one little simple something, because we were feeling so outraged. And so we had, and there was an incident where one of the basically elder midwives, white midwives, like took the sign down, balled it up, and like threw it at the only preceptor of color who happened to be Black, who was in our clinic. So we were outraged, like this aggression, and not to say that there hadn't been microaggressions, not to say that there hadn't been other things that were not microaggressions, but this was like a really...
That's not a microaggression. That's an out and out aggressive.
Yeah, it's an out and out antagonization, you know, and needless to say, it brought us together as students, and we just like were outraged, right? We were outraged. This was my only preceptor of color. So, you know, it's really challenging when you go to midwifery school because, you know, caring for birthing people, caring for pregnant people is so deeply rooted in our ancestral traditions across the world. But to have had these events like colonization and white supremacy, like take these traditions, right? And then repackage them and then sell them back to us. So like now I don't have an opportunity to learn from my grandmas. I have to like go and learn from, you know, other white women who could afford that education. And then I have to go and learn from them something that was taken ancestrally, right? So it's just like really layered. It's really complicated. It's really, you know, it's a lot. And so this one preceptor of color who happened to be Black, it's like she meant everything, right? To have this like one person who's like not even like specifically from my tradition, but just to have someone of color in that experience, in that position of being a teacher, and then to have just like this total and utter, just like violent, in my opinion, act perpetuated against her after like already dealing with what it meant to be in that institution, right? So just like insult on top of injury on top of insult. And so we basically as students rallied together, and you know, some of us even put on like, we're like, okay, like you tore it down from the wall, but we're gonna like put it on our bodies. And we like wore Black Lives Matter signs that we made, and we did all the, and it prompted me, and I went to the store and I bought things to make buttons that we could wear. And we went to the administration and we said, we need this person removed. We need to have a conversation about restorative justice. We need to like figure out how this is gonna work. And, you know, unsurprisingly, it didn't move in the direction that really facilitated any change. We had people come out and actually facilitate a dialogue about this, and it just became really clear that the organization had no investment in really changing structurally, right? So so who knows? I don't know what the school, they've done nothing really to change any of those things, but we did what we could do as students to do this. And it's really challenging because sometimes as a student of color, you literally are put in a position where in some ways you end up participating in this thing that it's such a manipulation, because you yourself know that this organization is not something that you want to be a part of, but it's your only vehicle to becoming this person and doing the work for your own community. So in so many ways, you end up kind of colluding without your consent, or colluding with no other option, right? And some of these things. And so as a result, like I thought, you know, like shutting down the school, that could do something, but then where do students of color go? You know, like what happens in these kinds of situations? So anyway, so as a result of that, like people were asking me like, oh, can I have a button? Can I have, you know, I want to support this. I want to do this. And I came to the realization that it would be a really amazing thing to create a scholarship around this. And so I had buttons printed, and I had stickers printed, and I just started like out of my house. Like I was like, okay, like I have these stickers. If people give me at least $15, I'll send you something, you know? And I like footed the bill for the printing, and I footed the bill for the postage. Which was not necessarily very sustainable, but I felt so passionately about it. Mm-hmm. And also the fact that, you know, even as a student of color, like I'm aware that I experience these things, but I also realize that there is a spectrum to which aggressions happen. And I'm aware that, you know, I'm not the most vulnerable among the population of people of color. And that for me, you know, it's just like, you know, for me to feel like we're going to gain ground, I need to support my sisters who are most vulnerable, right? And so for me, that means supporting Black women in becoming midwives so that they can serve their own community. And I don't like to get into the statistics around Black birth and Black health outcomes and all these things, because I feel like even that is a mind game that gets played on us, because when you're a student, the way that you get taught statistics about people of color is so oppressive, and the way that it plays out, it's like it convinces people that somehow, the way that it's worded, it's like somehow people are defective, you know, like, you know, if you're Black, you're 3 times as likely to die in labor. It's like, okay, it sounds like something's wrong with you, right? So I don't like to utilize those kind of statistics, but what I can say is that, you know, rephrasing it to really reflect what's real, and that is that, like, people who experience white supremacy in their healthcare, in their reproductive time, you know, of their life, are more likely to be neglected, to get poor care, to not have their needs met, or to be listened to or heard. And so therefore it results in poor outcomes, right? So I think that it's important for us even to kind of reframe the language, because that's like colonial language, right? That's not, for me, effective, because it's like, oh yeah, poor them, you know, they're just, you know, people of color, it's like, oh, the diabetes and the this and the that, and we start to, I feel like it's part of that way of making people be less than, because you're going through that because somehow you're defective or you're deficient, right? Where there's clearly evidence that states that when people get care that's compassionate, that's from people who look like them and understand them, that they fare so much better, right? And there are actually a lot of amazing Black midwives out there who are proving all the statistics wrong, right? That if you get good care, you have good outcomes, right? Or better outcomes, right? So for me, I just want to like step a little bit away from that. And my focus is just to say, let's support the education of Black student midwives so that they can get in there and serve their own community. Because my experience, even in this little microcosm of midwifery school, has told me that there's a lot of work to be done to dismantle the white supremacy that takes place in the medical industrial complex, and even in the home birth, lovey-dovey, Ina May world, right? And I just say Ina May, not because I'm like calling her out or anything, but just because it's like people's version of what midwifery is only Ina May, right? And Ina May herself will say that her teachers were also like the Black granny midwives, and she learned techniques also from Indigenous midwives. So there's a whole spectrum of midwifery out there that we don't even allow ourselves to see sometimes. And it goes beyond Ina May, right? And it's before Ina May, right? So just saying all of that to say that we, even in that world where we think it's so loving and so sistery and so hippie and so earthy and so whatever, that it plays out even in that microcosm. The macro of the medical industrial complex still plays out even in home birth midwifery education and apprenticeships and all of that, right? So that in order to dismantle that, that's such a huge job. And I feel like, yes, we have a responsibility to that. And also, like, let's do the thing that we can actually do right now, which is give money to Black midwives so that they can provide care to Black families and improve birth outcomes. So we don't have to wait for everybody to get on board and do the right thing because that takes time, right? That takes systemic change, which I'm invested in as well. And in the meantime, I don't want to lose any more Black lives, right? So if we can support that education, because it's really challenging for people of color to access that education, because it's almost like you can't even work when you're apprenticing, right? So you even have to be in a certain economic class, right, to access. And people, birth workers all over the place can speak to this, doulas, you know, any kind of birth workers or people who go into non-traditional medical fields like acupuncture or whatever, chiropractors. It's like you can't, to access this thing, it's like really expensive, and you don't even get the full respect because you're not an MD in quotation marks, right? Mm-hmm. And then you have to not work and forget about it if you want to have children and all these other things. It's just like pile layers upon layer that make it challenging, right? Mm-hmm. For everyone, and then forget about it if you're already experiencing white supremacy on a daily basis, right? So it's just a whole complicated thing. And I feel like if we can just simply have a scholarship fund that takes that one worry off the table, then let's do that, right? So that's what Midwives for Black Lives is about. And to date, I have given one scholarship. It was an honorary scholarship to the apprentice of that midwife. So that midwife who was my preceptor, who had that violent act perpetuated against her, eventually left and has her practice where she serves her community, and she's just an amazing, powerful person. And she was taking on a new apprentice, and so as an honorary, just a way of honoring that, we gave that scholarship in that honorary way. Mm-hmm. But I had to create a whole mechanism for like, how do people apply and because for me, I was like, let's just give Black women money. Like, I don't, it's like, why do we even have to question this, right? And then all those questions that come with, how do we create a scholarship, right? Because I had to do a lot of fundraising for my education. And some of these scholarships, I was like, oh my God, I have to make myself just sound so poor. You know, and how that messes with your mind too, right? Like what that does and how that oppresses you sometimes, even in that generosity, like people are wanting to be generous, but even that has like colonial, white supremacy, whatever attached to it. And so for me, I was like, I want to create something that doesn't further oppress people of color, right? And so in having conversation with another Black midwife, we concluded that it would be the best thing to do was to do things in a more ancestral way, which is like, you know, whenever you came into whatever you were, right, your community supported you. You had like someone to mentor you. You had someone to speak for you, and your community would speak for you, right, and vouch for you and support you. And so, you know, the way that this scholarship fund works is that you basically are nominated by someone in your community who knows you, who can speak for you. It can be more than one person. And so that's kind of the process, but it's not this like, prove to me you're the poorest of the poor, you know, or whatever. It's just like, you know, are you called to this work? Right? And can people see that in you? Mm-hmm. Right? So that we're investing in this talent that you have to give your community, because that's going to have the biggest outcome. Right?
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, it's so wonderful to hear the whole story, and I'm so grateful that you could come on here and share how this came about and the structures of it. And so if someone is listening to this and is thinking to themselves, goodness, I could really use that scholarship, or I know somebody who could really use that scholarship. What, you know, we're talking about setting it up, and I was going to help you, but basically you have a form that people can fill out to nominate someone. So say for example, I was a woman of color who wanted to go to midwifery school, and I wanted to apply for this scholarship. What would I do? Would I go to somebody that I've been talking to this about, a community member, a family member, and say, hey, can you nominate me for this, and here's the form? Or if I know somebody, would I go to them?
It's perfectly acceptable that if you are a Black student midwife and you've heard about this scholarship and you know that the people who love and support you and would speak for you in the community don't know about this scholarship, it's perfectly good to come to them and say, do you feel like you could give your word on my behalf, right? And ask them then to do that for you. I think it's totally appropriate.
Right.
And specifically this fund is specifically aimed for Black student midwives. There is another fund that I'm not a sponsor of, but that I could also share a link with you later, that is for other midwives of color.
Oh, okay.
And that's another project, but I can definitely share that information wherever we put this information. So if people want to support other funds, it's like Monarch Midwives. One of my homegirls in California is doing this from Mama Grace. So, but I'm specifically, so it's totally appropriate to do it that way also.
Okay. So this is specifically for Black midwifery students. Okay.
Yes.
So say I know a Black midwifery student or somebody who's considering that, should I approach them first and say, hey, you know, I'm thinking of nominating you for this scholarship fund, so that they'd be in on it and I get their permission to share their information?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes, that would be appropriate.
Yeah.
Definitely checking in with them that they would want to be a recipient would be good. But yeah, I mean, that's exactly the way that it works, because what's going to happen, and the reason that I went with this nomination process is because I thought what's going to happen is that we all know that person that we know. We're like, oh my God, you're so called to this work, and I would vouch for you in that work. Mm-hmm. Right? So it's less about how broke are you, or are you how many awards do you have, or how many, you know what I mean? It's not about any of that kind of status. It's really about how we come into this work in a way that is such our calling, that we came into our calling, and that as a community we need to hold them up so that they can fulfill that calling. Mm-hmm. Right?
Absolutely. And we need to support that. This is, like you say, one of the most vulnerable populations. So absolutely supporting Black midwives in any way that we can to, facilitate the process in service to that community is really just injecting medicine right where it's needed the most. So I thank you so much for your vision on this. All right. So is there anything else you want to share about this project, how people can get involved and share about it?
I think that those are the basic premises. And I'm working on, by the time this airs, I should have it available on there should be a whole page dedicated to Midwives for Black Lives on my website, which we will share the link for. And then I'm going to have it all set up for people to make a donation. So really, as funds are available, that's how I'm able to give the scholarships, right? So as funds are available, I can give people scholarships that range from $500 to $1,500. Ideally, and I would really love to be able to give our next scholarship. I've been really building this from the ground up, and once we stopped being in school together and we all moved back to our respective states, I really was kind of left with wow, I'm a new midwife, I need to start a practice, I need to do all this. So a lot of groundwork had to be laid, right? The process for people to get the money. And I now have a umbrella nonprofit who can make donations tax deductible, right? So that took some time. I now have a volunteer who's going to put it on my website. I now have people who are helping out. So also, if you're interested in supporting in a really tangible way as well, let me know, because this is an ally movement. This is how do we join together to support the most vulnerable, right? And so that's what I feel is our job to do. So I don't feel I own it either. I don't speak for Black midwives. I don't speak for their experience, but I want to give them money. Mm-hmm. That's what I'm about.
There we go.
Give them the thing that's gonna give some ease to this experience, knowing that they're going to be in institutions that are not necessarily skilled or committed to supporting their effort, right? So let's take that financial burden off of them. So donations in any amount are absolutely welcomed. And there will be a way for you to let me know if you want a bumper sticker or if you want a pin to be able to highlight your support for midwives, Black midwives. So yeah, I'm excited. Thank you everyone for your generosity in advance. And thank you, Sama, for inviting me to share this with other people.
Indeed. And one way that I'll be supporting this is that those of you who donate really in any amount will receive, if it's in whatever increment of $9 you donate, that's how many months free membership you get for the Womb-Centered Healing Temple, which includes access to advanced and ongoing access to the summit, the Embodied Shakti Summit, and all previous summits and all future summits, and all of my online coursework and all of that. So you get this huge perk from me for donating, and whatever those increments are for a number of months of membership. You can also just make a one-time $90 donation if you just want ongoing lifetime access to the Embodied Shakti Summit. So that's what I'm offering, and then I hope to be involved and invite others to get involved in whatever else besides money that you want to offer to Monica and this effort to assist in this way. And let's return to a caring economy that values the ways that we care for each other. And so that's my prayer and my devotion for us in this time. So we all need to return to that way of relating, of caring for each other, and value that in our lives. So thank you so much, Monica, for joining me in this and doing this work. It's very much appreciated.
Thank you.
All right. So look for the links above to check out the Midwives for Black Lives webpage, where you'll be able to donate, you'll be able to nominate, you'll be able to get information about how to volunteer. All right. Take good care. That's all for now, and until next time.